and just really glad to be here doing this in person. This is our 11th annual survey, and it was conducted in July, the same time we do it every year. And the headlines is that the luminaries reported really upbeat feedback, and a common thread was, and you'll see in the results, the positive impact of EUV on a number of aspects of the photomask industry. So that ranges from mass revenue to the purchasing of multi-beam writers, and then to the confidence in doing curvilinear masks. So let's look at the data here in a minute, and I want to just say thank you to the 79 luminaries who participated. They represented 44 different companies. That's been very consistent over the 10 past years, as well as the distribution you see in the chart, which over 2/3 represent a combination of mass manufacturing and equipment sectors. Now, I'm going to go quickly through the results and the analysis because we have then the panel to add the commentary. And we had 13 questions. 11 of them were repeat questions and 2 new ones on high NA EUV. So with that, the first result is a repeat question, and you see on the right that 78% indicated that EUV masks have a positive impact on the overall mask revenue. And that was consistent with last year, shown on the left, that 74% said the same thing. So that's our first data point around the impact of EUV being quite positive. Now, what about the overall mass market? Are the luminaries as positive about the growth as they were last year when you guys knocked it out of the park at $5 billion, so setting a new record? Well, the answer is yes. 70% in the right-hand side said that mass revenues would increase again this year, and that compared to 72% last year on the left-hand side who said that, and they were right. So now let me kind of come back to then the thread of EUV's impact on the industry. We've been tracking in the survey with several questions some of the critical areas to EUV adoption. So let's look at those, and I'm going to start with mask inspection first. And the overall message here is that the confidence is high in actinic EUV inspection. And this is quite a busy chart, so I'm going to break it down for you so we see how we get there. So in the chart, there's 4 rows, and that represents 4 different statements that we asked the luminaries to say, do they agree or disagree? And agreement is shown in the dark green and dark blue. And the 4 statements have 4 different solutions to mask inspection to be used by 2023. So you can see in the top line, that's where the 69% agreed with the statement that actinic inspection would be used by 2023. That was a similar result as the last several years, so the confidence has remained high. Similarly, on the last line, we see 39% agreeing that eBeam multi-beam inspection of wafers would be used. That was similar to the past. And then on the line above it, we had 71% agree that any kind of inspection of wafers would be used for that purpose. And that was actually up from 60% last year. And then finally, on the second line, we had 24% who agreed with the statement that eBeam multi-beam mask inspection would be used. And that was actually down from 42% last year. Let me move on to another critical area we've tracked, and that's pellicles. So I'm going to thank Emily Gallagher for helping with some interpretation of this. We kind of concluded from looking at the 3 years of history with this year's result on the bottom in gold. 23% said that pellicles would be used for EUV this year. And when we looked at the answer in the first year from the previous 2 years, that was significantly up from 10% last year and then 3% 2 years ago. You can also see the data is quite centered still around 2023, although you can see in the gold that there's a future tale that not everybody agrees with that. And then a topic near and dear to the mask makers' hearts, turnaround time. So we've tracked that again in the feedback on the right. 70% said that turnaround time for EUV would be longer or much longer than 193i today. And that compared and contrasted with 74% who said that last year for 2023 compared to 2021. Now, you've heard a lot of discussion just in the presentations about how multi-beam mask writing should improve turnaround time. So I think that's going to be an interesting discussion for the panel to have. And in our new questions, we found 59% of the luminaries predict that high NA EUV would be used for the first time in 2026 or before. But as we all know, that's not the whole story. What about broad adoption for more than one company? And for that, 76% said that would be 2027 or beyond. Okay, so now I'm going to switch to the topic of deep learning and the survey question, which also has very much a future focus. 63% on the bottom line said it would be 2024 or beyond before deep learning would become a competitive advantage in the mask making process. And that has been continuing to shift out, because if you look at the blue above it for last year, only 31% thought it was 2024 and beyond. We've seen this kind of shifting in data before. For those of you who've been coming a few years, you probably remember I presented slides like this for about 4 years in a row for EUV adoption. And then suddenly, in I think it was 2015, we saw a shift. We saw the shift towards positive perception on the adoption. And so for deep learning, we're still waiting to see that shift. So back to EUV and the impact. Well, it's the #1 reason, again, this year for buying multi-beam mask writers. So again, the results need a little bit of explanation. So that the EUV more precision required is on the far left as the #1 reason. And you can see that by the height of the rectangle. And after that is more throughput for EUV masks. And the rest followed the same order as last year. You can tell that the dark blue shading represents last year's average, so you can see that nothing changed in the order. Curvilinear for EUV and ILT, third and fourth, and then more precision and then more throughput for 193i are in fifth and sixth. But the other interesting thing about looking at the way we've plotted this is to look inside each rectangle, and we've got the distribution of the votes. So voting 1 means it's the most important. And you can see that, say, for example, on #2, more throughput for EUV mask, there's a couple of peaks. So that tells you that there's actually differing opinions about that. As well, you see that for curvilinear ILT for 193i. Some are thinking that's more important than others. And also for more throughput for 193i masks. And what the luminaries have told us about prediction on sales for multi-beam is very positive. 93% believe that not only will sales increase next year, but over the next 3 years. And the fact is, that's been the case for the last 3 years. As I've plotted in this, you can see on the far right, it's been over 90% who felt like it was going to increase for the next 3 years. There's also plots here for other types of mask writers, from laser mask writers to trailing edge and advanced VSB. And there's one other positive to note, and that's how that year to year, the prediction for increasing has kept increasing for laser mask writers as well. We've tracked now for 6 years about ILT usage, and this year the overarching summary is that over 90% are saying that today there's at least a few or more critical layers that are using ILT. So it's probably almost time to declare that we all agree ILT is here. In fact, we had been asking for 3 years about curvilinear ILT usage and had basically declared that it's here to stay. So we had moved on with our questions to kind of explore, well, what are the concerns around curvilinear ILT? And the results this year changed. They're slightly different than last year. Mask infrastructure or mask shop software infrastructure became the #1 reason or #1 concern by the luminaries, and that replaced mask inspection. So you can see last year the dark blue was higher. ILT software was 3rd, mask metrology 4th, and then notably access to multi-beam mask writers dropped to 5th from 3rd, and then followed by mask repair. Again, I'll point you to looking inside the rectangles for the distribution, and look at #5 for multi-beam mask writers. What you see there is an interesting U shape. So for some, it's not a barrier, but for some, obviously, it still is. And this sort of sums up as, okay, are these concerns overcomable? And yes, there's great confidence that curvilinear mask making is going to be done. 76% said that at least a limited number of curvilinear masks could be done by the end of 2023. And only 1% thinks that the concerns we just had in the previous slide are insurmountable. So, again, in wrapping up, the summary is very upbeat, and it very much tells a story of a positive EUV impact for the photomask industry. So, again, I want to thank all those who participated in the survey and encourage people to use it internally or externally. I've heard stories that people do that, and I've seen it presented at different conferences, so we encourage you to do that. And the slides are already available on the ebeam.org site. The presentations from the 3 speakers will be there as of 7:30 as well.